All right, so here we are, episode 3. Interesting start to the day. Probably wasn't how I expected today to start. And I'm sure that Matt was not expecting to be walking in a file with me up in front of a formation again. Uh, so, no, we weren't patrolling in Panjwai. We were walking on a glacier. What'd you think about that, Matt?
Yeah, that was kind of surreal considering all this. Yeah, when she said you're gonna be in a file, I was just like, really? All right, is this a joke? Yeah.
Yeah, man, that would be weird. It was almost weird to see the picture that you sent me,
Yeah,
Curtis.
of us walking
It
in
was
a
like,
line.
wait, is that Matt Kohler behind him in a line? Yeah, that was
Yeah.
just
And we
weird.
had Texans instead of Afghans there with us.
That's true. We were dragging them along as if they were Afghans. Like, come on, get on. Let's go. We're going this way.
There might be an argument that there's a lot of similarities between Texans and Afghans.
Yeah. we
Cue the
oh yeah,
hatred.
here it comes. Ah, Texas.
Yeah.
Um I made the joke while we were walking. I was like, "Oh, do you want me to make some like mine detector noises?"
The fewer the noises, the better.
Yeah.
But we were the other week ago we were looking at one of those videos and we were amazed at how many noises that thing made. Like even when it was like safe. So I'm not 100% sure I ever really knew how to operate that thing.
Yeah.
No, I don't think I did either. By the end, I was just kind of like sweeping it around, and if it made a big noise, I would stop and kind of think, "Is this where an ID
Right.
should be?" You know?
The turkey sound, right?
The turkey sound.
Yeah,
You hear a
exactly.
turkey. Mark the ground.
Yep, spray paint. So to our listeners, Matt Kohler is here with us, or with me at least, in Alaska. He and his wife Lauren came up to visit. We've had a great time. And it's been a immense pleasure to have him here. I have not seen him since 2014, so it's been awesome.
Absolutely, and it's been great to be here. Hospitality has been outstanding, and
It's so great. Yeah.
we just appreciate having the opportunity to be here and do this.
Yeah, we appreciate you taking the effort to take your time and away from your family and everything to fly up and do this for us. It's pretty cool to have this first interaction be in the
Yeah.
flesh, at least
Yeah,
for y'all.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So you're here now, but could you tell us a little bit about how you came to join the Army, how you chose the infantry, and how you specifically ended up with us at Spurwingar? And give it like us the elevator speech.
Yeah, so I was playing football at Utah State University. I was a dream of mine to play Division I football. Newly married, and my wife Lauren had just joined the Army, and I was kind of learning a little bit about myself at that time. Shortly after, I had some injuries playing football, and with the birth of our first son, I was able to decide that football wasn't really the path forward for me. I was sitting in our apartment early in the fall semester of 2017, and
2017 or 2007?
sorry, yeah, 2007. Yeah, 2007. And I was watching the Iraq War unfold right in front of me on TV. Pat Tillman story came on, and it really resonated with me. It was the first time I'd heard his story, and the first time I really considered that I would, even join the military. It was something that I had thought about maybe a little bit in high school, but then dismissed. So I went to the ROTC, actually met up with a recruiter there. He was a lieutenant colonel, and he told me basically everything that I needed to know and everything that I needed to hear. That was what I was going to do. I made the decision to join the ROTC in 2007, and that was really the beginning of it for me. Um,
When did you graduate?
I graduated with my master's degree actually in 2010 and commissioned in 2010. And that was the beginning of my career as an officer. I spent a little bit of time recruiting at Utah State in their recruiting program for ROTC, and then went on to infantry basic course where I prepared for Ranger School. Really, that was the next step for me, and it was what I was wanting to do. Finished the basic infantry officers course at Fort Benning and went straight into Ranger School. And I was able to go through Ranger School in 61 days with the help of my peers around me and a really good group of men that I knew from the basic infantry officers course. In 2000, that was 2011, and shortly after graduating Ranger School, I found myself at Fort Stewart. I was meeting with the battalion commander for my first assignment, and he thought it was just hilarious that he would make me an armor officer. And honestly, I think it was a little bit more than that. I think he had more information about what was coming down the pipe
Right.
for the battalion, but
Because this would have been about a month before the rest of the battalion even knew that they were deploying.
absolutely, yeah. So I spent a month as an armor officer in an armor platoon, learning all about tanks, something that I thought I would never do. And then shortly after that, we found out that we were going to NTC, and then we would be deploying as a dismounted force in Afghanistan. And Kandahar was where we would be ending up there. So I took that armor platoon, and with the help of my platoon sergeant, who was one of the early influences as far as my experience goes with NCOs. He really taught me a lot about what it means to be a good officer. Not trying to brag that I was amazing or anything, but I learned a lot from Sergeant First Class Peck, and he really steered me down the right path to leading soldiers in the Army. We went to NTC, and that was one of my first opportunities to truly lead soldiers. It was one of those experiences where you bond with your men, and you have the opportunity to learn just what their mettle is, and how they are going to react in a wartime situation. And it was at that time that we actually found out that we would be going to be dropping one platoon to Bravo Company, and a platoon from Bravo Company would be coming over to Charlie Company, and then we deployed. That was It was very quick. I think from the time that I got there to the unit, it was a short 5 months, and we were in Afghanistan.
And now you spent a good portion of that first time in Afghanistan at Kandahar with your armor platoon.
Yeah, we were assigned as a PSD for an admiral and his team of lawyers. It was the rule of law group there at Kandahar Airfield, and that gave me the opportunity to see Afghanistan from a little bit different perspective than the combat perspective I saw. Um, we had the opportunity to take the rule of law team around Afghanistan, Kandahar City, and different locations around Kandahar City. It was an opportunity for me to kind of understand how to operate in Afghanistan, and how to really work with the people and work with my team. And that was the first 3 months while I was in Afghanistan. Not a dangerous mission per se, but an important mission, and one that I took very seriously.
So, at what point did you find out you were going to be leaving and going to Sparwangar?
Shortly after we were detached to the rule of law PSD mission, and I went out to Kenjikak, and my commander basically let me know, you're going to be tasked to a different mission. He kind of gave me an idea, uh, but it was shortly after that, returning back from Kenjikak, that I found out that I would be going to Sperwangar. I don't remember exactly the situation, but it was sitting down with my platoon sergeant, and we got a call from the company leadership, and they let us know there were going to be some changes, and I would be heading out to Sperwangar.
How much notice did you get?
It was very little notice, just a couple days, and uh, and really not a lot of time to prepare myself for the change of mission.
Right.
But
Or your soldiers?
no, yeah, absolutely. But I knew that the platoon was going to be in good hands with Sergeant Peck, and honestly, most days they had gotten to the point where they understood the mission, and it was an opportunity for them to continue to run a mission that they were good at and understood, and an opportunity for me to uh, finally get in and use my infantry skills that I had learned through Ranger School. And
So what had you heard about Sparrowgar before you ended up out there? Was there anything turning on a rumor mill, or I mean, what did you have an idea of what was going on, or what?
yeah, there were rumors every day about what was happening out in Panjwai, and that was, I think, the exciting thing for me, but also very frightening in a way. I knew about Luxmore, Corporal Luxmore, and his passing. I knew about and had heard about other stories of uh, contact uh, with the Taliban, and I knew that it was a daily fight um, out there. Besides that, you don't really understand until you get out there what you're getting into, until you've been on the ground and you've had the opportunity to walk around in a single file and and really understand what it's like to know that each step could be your last step. Yeah.
For sure.
So you went out on a few kind of cakewalk patrols when you got to us before we started to get back into the serious areas. Do you remember the mission in which, the first mission in which you took contact, or in which there was a significant, threat level?
Absolutely. The first mission that I was actually on my own without Lieutenant Persons, who was the platoon leader before me. We were in the area of Najat. We got on the ground, and we immediately started getting radio chatter from the talk that there were enemy combatants in the area, and that we would likely be taking contact soon. A short time after we started hearing about uh, enemy in the area, we also started receiving directions from higher to uh, move up north, basically into the heart of where the enemy movement was being detected. It was my understanding that we had Predator on station, and when you have an asset like that, you you got to take advantage of it, sure, right? And that was what I was getting from the talk at the time. So we were given instructions to make that movement, and it was a a decision that I made to not move the entire platoon in that direction. We broke off a small group, myself, and Sergeant Rosales, you, Curtis were part of that lovely operation or sub operation, and I think Perez was there as well as Boyce, the RTO, um, and we started our movement, and at that time we started to take contact, and it was for me one of those experiences that you never forget, right? When somebody is shooting at you, and you start to think, um, are they shooting at me? And then you realize
They are shooting at me.
someone's trying to kill me right now. Yeah, and it's definitely surreal. It's something that you guys had had seen and had experienced, but for me, I was experiencing that for the first time.
Did it sound like you thought it would? Like, did you have any idea what to expect in terms of what the incoming gunfire would sound like, or?
You do all of these simulations and training, and you think you know what it's going to sound like, and then when you've got bullets popping and whizzing overhead, it's not anything like being shot at with blanks.
Yeah.
It's just a completely different situation, and so that experience taught me quite a bit. It taught me that the platoon that I had been attached to, Scrapper Platoon, First Platoon, Bayonet Company, a group of men who knew what combat was and were not afraid to step up to fight the enemy.
Yeah, I think it's important to kind of clarify that this was a pretty thick and bushy firefight. That this was not kind of your standard wares, hit and run, couple rounds. It was a pretty intense ambush, a really complex ambush where they essentially opened up on the rear element where I was, and then they opened up on you guys more or less at the same time. So it felt very coordinated and organized. And they hit us in the back with a PKM and an AK. And I know you guys were so close to them. Like Curtis, you said that you could hear them, right?
Oh yeah, I could hear him talking and then reloading.
Right.
I think it was AKs they were reloading, but I wasn't listening that close.
Yeah. So
like,
I think
we need to move.
Not only did you get first contact, but that firefight in the back it was bad for us, and in the front it was bad for you guys. So that was a hell of an introduction to the AO for sure.
And that's all that happened on that mission. That's worth mentioning.
No, no. The other thing to mention is, and it's important to understand is that we made those movements. We put ourselves in that position, and and we expected to have Predator engage, and unbeknownst to us, had checked off station 9 minutes prior to contact. And so you do these things, and in the heat of battle, things don't necessarily always go the way that you think they're going to go. It was a pretty long movement that we made to get in there, and then we had Kiowas check on with us, and it stopped, and that gave us the opportunity to kind of regroup. And at that point, without any other assets available to us, we knew that we had to take off. It was time to end the mission and end the patrol. And on that movement out, it was another smoker.
Everybody was destroyed, anyways, because it was in the middle of the day. It was like 3:00 in the evening, and it was 100+ degrees.
Yeah, all my water was gone at that point. We had those big 2-liter bottles of water we carry, liter and a half, I think.
Yeah.
And I had gone through at least 3 of those plus my Camelback, and that was empty. I had nothing.
And that was pretty typical from what I learned later on. That when you go into those types of situations, you prepare the best you can, but you really start to understand that, this is a little bit more than what we bargained for today.
Yeah.
And uh, and it was another learning moment for me. I learned just how much the platoon was willing to sacrifice for each other. I saw the team carry you out of there, basically.
And for our listeners, I'll go ahead and fess up. I was carrying a saw all day. I drank all my water. It was very hot, and I wasn't gonna quit. There's no way I was gonna quit, especially not on new LT's first patrol. And uh, we when we were leaving, I was already smoked, and we had to cross a plowed, flooded field, which it was just like thigh deep
It's like
mud.
cake batter.
And I took like 4 steps in it, and then I was out.
Down.
I was down. Like it wasn't even optional. I was just out.
I remember watching you collapse, man. It was like a sack of potatoes. You just went down.
I woke up to Bally slapping the ever living shit out of me, like open hand man slap, just blasting me into consciousness. And then I was up, and yeah, I mean,
And anybody who's carried a saw knows exactly what that feels like, right? Yeah, I mean, you carry all your own ammunition. You carry this heavy weapon that is meant for urban warfare, but not necessarily meant for climbing over grape rows on a daily basis. Yeah. So,
but I think that's another thing right there is, yeah, I don't know what your impression is when your helicopter first came into Panjwai, but it looked flat to us. We're like, this is flat. This is going to be easy. And it just, the movement, just the different kinds of terrain, climbing up and over walls, through flooded fields, through canals, up and over grape rows. It was taxing. It was like a long distance CrossFit marathon or something. I don't know how you compare it, but
absolutely, it was as our commander used to tell us, it was getting after it every day, and we did those types of missions were the norm. That became what we did on a daily basis, and you got really good at understanding how to manage those terrain challenges and be able to give it back to the enemy. It's always difficult to fight in somebody else's home territory, but we figured it out.
I mean, we all got home from that one. I think we had about 6 guys in the aid station with IVs, but we got back. I believe that would have been in early July, if memory serves me correctly. So I would say the next real challenge that we ran into when you were there was comes to my mind is Minotaur Down.
Yeah, Minotaur Down was one of those missions where, once again, it was based on the planning. It was supposed to be an in and out. We're going to go and take this 2,000-pound front loader with a mine clearing device on the front and
remote controlled.
Absolutely.
It's basically a bobcat with a mine roller on the front of it.
Yep, yeah. Absolutely. And we're going to take it down one of the most dangerous avenues in the AO, and we're going to drive it around in the enemy's backyard, and then we're going to head back home and head to CAF for a little bit of R&R, right?
Some milkshakes and smoothies.
Yeah.
TGI Fridays.
And that's what we thought we were going to do. What ended up happening was early on in the mission, we took contact. The plan was to move south through that village on a well beaten trail, but not a very wide trail, just wide enough for the Minotaur to basically be able to clear the walls on the right side and a riverbank on the left side. And as happens when people take cover, um, they don't necessarily care about a remote control in their hands, and that Minotaur went during a pretty close contact. Actually, remember seeing a guy poke his head around the wall and start firing at us, and we were chewing the ground basically, and that Minotaur went off the trail and right into a creek bank.
Jesus.
Best laid plans. Just drive this thing around, prove that we can.
Yeah.
Drive right into a creek.
And that's exactly what it was, right? Prove that we can take this thing anywhere we want to take it, and the reality of the situation was we had no business taking that thing where we took it that day.
Yeah, I always thought it was a flawed concept. Like, we're going to build this thing that can drive over IEDs and set them off. But then there was no, like, continuation of that plan. There's no follow through. Like, well, what happens if it gets blown up? Or, in this case, it drove into a creek. I mean, if it hit an IED and had been totaled, we would have been in the same spot of having to salvage this $500,000 piece of equipment. Because, as we would find out, there's no way that we could leave it there.
Oh yeah, and that was what we got from hire. Initially, our recommendation was, let's throw a couple thermite grenades on this thing, pull any sensitive items off of it, and burn it in the ditch there. And that was not acceptable from hire's perspective, and so the ultimate plan was to protect this thing and wait for a bulldozer to bulldoze down a mile path, basically from the nearest route to get to it, to pull it out.
So we built a mile road with a bulldozer to pull this thing out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, whenever this is first contact, the Minotaur rolls into the ditch, and then when does Boyce get hit?
So it was that actual contact where Boyce, my RTO, took a round to his abdomen. We'll call it his abdomen because
it was his dick. It was right above his dick.
And yeah, that really was a huge blow to the platoon, because Boyce was an outstanding radio operator. He knew his job.
Boyce survived, by the way.
So for the first little bit of that day, when all this drama was unfolding, our squad was actually in the trucks up at OP Mosque, and I was like sitting on the gun, listening to all this stuff play out over the radio. And I remember Boyce queuing up, and he was like mid conversation. I hear the AK open up, and then it just like it stops, And I had this like really weird sinking pit. I was like, Boyce has been hit. I just knew it was Boyce, because of how the radio sounded, and like the way it just cut off automatically. And so we were sitting there, knowing somebody had been hit, or I think Bally was trying to queue up you guys on the horn and couldn't get any response out of anybody, and we were trying to figure out what's going on. But I just had this really weird, instinctual, guttural feeling that it was Boyce. And so, when you guys, how did this all play out down there?
So Boyce ended up rolling down into the ditch himself, went into the water, and you guys know what that's like, carrying all that gear and then being essentially stuck in the water, and you can't do much to get yourself out of there. So we did what we could to pull him out. It was a good ditch. I think there's even video of it.
Yeah, we have the video. We'll throw it on here while you're talking.
And we did. We were able to get Boyce up and over the riverbank, and I remember as we're pulling him up, you do, you know, what you can. You're trying to still maintain some amount of security and be able to return fire if anything happens at that point. But um, I remember I'm reaching down to help pull him up, and a couple of us were, and I flagged him with my weapon, and he said, and he's like, "Sir, don't shoot me again."
Oh, yeah.
That says a lot about him. I think I have a great little takeaway from this whole drama is that when you guys finally got him out of there and back to the truck, so we actually loaded him onto my truck and we took him back to Spare One Guard for the medevac. And of course, I hopped out, and I was on one end of the stretcher, and Boyce, of course, he had a couple of morphine lollipops at this point, and we had been playing Skyrim on their Xbox in their room for the entire deployment up to this point. And we go to put him on the bird, and Boyce looks up at me and he goes, "Copy." He said, "Don't let her play my Skyrim character for me." I said, "I will, man. I will. I'll take care of it. I'll take care of your character for you." That was pretty good right there. And then we put him on the bird.
Yeah, and then about 18 hours after that first contact, we finally walked out of there. But that that day, I want to say, while we guarded that thing, we took contact uh, 12 to 15 times, and the only saving grace was really having helicopter support
Yeah.
come in, and that was the only time the fighting stopped. Really, was when we had birds on overhead, and when they left, it started back up.
Yeah. And that was killing us being in the trucks. And Curtis, you were in the trucks too, right?
Yeah, and I never got out, but I do remember we dismounted a lot of people from the
Yeah.
truck. So I think all the gunners got out.
Yeah.
We combat locked the doors, and we sent a good portion of our guys, probably a fire team worth, up the
I
road
think
with.
4 or 5 of us went down there. Yeah, because I remember it was killing us to be separated from you guys while all this was going on. And so we were working everything on our end to try and get somebody in the truck so that at least some of us could go down there. And so, but it was still way up into the day. I mean, it was late when we finally 4 or 5 of us got dismounted and walked into you guys. And I just remember walking down there thinking like, oh fuck, why did I? It's like, yeah, it's like, why did I do this? I should have stayed in the trucks. No, I'm just joking. But I remember walking out that night. We took that road out that y'all had driven the Minotaur down, and it was like pitch black dark. Even under nods, there was no light, and I just remember that pucker factor. And I remember we finally stepped off onto Hyena, off of the dirt and onto the asphalt. And I looked at Bally and I said, "You couldn't have got a toothpick in my asshole." It was slow moving.
Yeah,
Well, I think that whole stint, like the fact you guys had to bunker down for, you know, 16 hours, is kind of why we ended up calling it Minotaur Down. Not because the Minotaur went down, but because it kind of turned into that shelter in place and situation, which obviously is nothing like what happened in Mogadishu, but
We kind of half jokingly called it that.
yeah,
Yeah.
but it kind of stuck.
yeah, and we had, one of the things that I don't want to miss saying is the amazing things that I saw guys do on that mission. You know, you we basically were on that path, and there was uh, a great enemy position where they could just open up, come around a corner. They didn't even have to stick their head around the corner. They just could have popped a PKM or an AK-47 around the corner and just lit us up straight down the line. And that was something that everybody on the ground understood and knew. And yet we had guys who volunteered to lay down at the front with a 240 uh, and guard the platoon essentially, and make sure that we weren't mowed down. And it was later in the day that uh, we we had taken contact, and uh, and we finally pushed into what I would call the Alamo, essentially, where we were able to provide overwatch on that piece of equipment, but still have a little bit better protection. But that's where we fought the rest of the day, uh, and I saw uh, I saw amazing things. Um, I don't want to name all the names off that I saw. Uh, you know, do some uh, valorous acts, but you had a Koa there, you had Brown there, you had Sergeant Nintz there, and they were all, like I said, if I start naming names off, I'm going to miss somebody, but they were all engaging the enemy and fighting. Not for the stupid piece of equipment in the ditch. It was for each other.
Yeah, for boys.
For boys, and to protect the platoon and make sure everybody got out safe.
Which I think became kind of a common thread for the next several weeks, because that was kind of the start of a really rough spread of time for us. Um, the next thing that happened to the platoon was Clark, which I think it was like a week later, if even that.
Yeah, very shortly after that, we were sitting in basically a QRF position, waiting, providing support for another mission south in near the Registan, and uh, we were, uh, expecting to have an easy day. Right? It was.
There's a common theme here.
Another theme.
If you expect it's going to be an easy day, it's probably not going to be, and that's what that turned into. We got called up around noon, and we completely different mission, but we were on QRF, and so Charlie Company 123 took contact, uh, and actually it was an IED Mascal, essentially. They had a daisy chained IED that went off uh, and injured a good number of people. Off the top of my head, I can't remember the number of casualties that they had, but it was a good significant portion of the platoon, including their platoon leader.
Yeah, I think he lost both of his legs.
Yeah, and we were called to support that Mascal. And what you know about a Mascal is that really people start you start running out of medical supplies, and so our understanding was we were going to provide some relief to these guys and uh, help get medical supplies to them that were uh, our understanding was much needed. We made the movement down Route Hyena and stopped just north of that position. I believe is about 2 clicks north, maybe a little bit further, and we dismounted, and um, we didn't have a significant ground force because of the nature of our QRF mission. We were supposed to be in vehicles and provide vehicular support. We weren't supposed to be dismounted that day, but we got on the ground, and Clark volunteered to take the lead. He was going to clear, and him and Sergeant Holt took off like you come to expect somebody who really cares about their fellow soldiers and is willing to put their life on the line. That's what happened with those two men that day, and they started making the movement.
And we had no partner forces on this one, if I remember correctly, which was extremely unusual.
Unusual and not your typical mission, not really even sanctioned, but because we were going to support American soldiers, I think Higher uh, found that uh, it was going to be acceptable for us to make that movement without Afghan forces.
I almost feel like that decision was just completely bypassed. It just no one even we decided to ask for permission instead of or ask for forgiveness instead of asking for permission, kind of thing.
Yeah, and if you think about it, if we had gone to pick up anybody from uh, from our Afghan uh, either local police or ANA, it would have taken another hour.
Yeah, it had brought it to a halt. Yeah,
So it was our understanding that we were going to provide some needed support and possibly help save lives, and that's what the platoon uh, was good at. We knew how to do that, and and so we made that movement. It was one of the fastest movements I've I remember. Even after that, I don't remember making a movement that quick, and it wasn't reckless. It was uh, it was people understanding the need.
and we were small. That we were able to move quick because there was only like a
7
squad.
or 8 of us,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's like a nine, just a handful.
Yeah, we started getting close, and that's when I started getting quite a bit of radio communication, both from our talk as well as from Charlie Company, we were going to support there. We were basically told one, the entire Kandahar area is watching you from the Masangar video feed right now, which was pretty nerve wracking, to say the least. And then the second communication that we got was um, if, and this was from Charlie Company, and they basically told us, if you don't have a bulldozer, why are you coming? And that was a little bit confusing uh, for me, and confusing for I think the rest of everybody who was there, because our understanding was we weren't providing bulldozer support. We weren't going to extract them that way. We were coming to provide medical attention, and um, it was shortly after that uh, Clark stepped on the IED.
And what do you remember about the moments leading up to that?
Um, Leading up to that, really, it was there was a lot of confusion. For me, this was a moment uh, that every leader knows. Take a tactical pause, right, and figure out what's going on. And for me, it was a mistake that I made, not doing that, not slowing the movement down at that point and trying to understand what was going on. Instead, Sergeant Holt and Clark continued making the movement, and it was just a couple seconds after those communications came in, and they were hit by that IED.
If I remember correctly, we were in a grape row. Most of the squad was, and in front of us was a 8 foot high wall, and it
Long
probably
one.
stretched. I'm sorry.
It was long. It was
Yeah,
probably 150, 200 meters long.
yeah. It wasn't one of those ones we could easily bypass. It would have added a significant amount to our movement to bypass the wall. But right in front of us was an enticing little gap, a little V in the wall, which on a normal day I think we would have known better. Clark definitely would have known better if he wasn't tired, frustrated, whatever. And he shared that with me, so I'm not putting words into his mouth. To go through that, like this is late August, but I think, like you said, there was that urgency and that care because we knew that there were at least 8 or 9 guys that needed our help, or we thought needed our help.
That was our understanding. Yeah.
So I mean, I think bypassing that wall would have cost us 30-40 minutes easily. There was no way to knock it down either because it was massive.
Another thing that was running through everybody's mind, at least from our perspective in terms of security, is that we were such a small unit. I think everybody had this lingering expectation to take contact on our way in because it was just kind of one of those days. And so that all of us were rushing, not really rushing, but all of us were hitting that pace, that really quick pace, And I think Clark and Holt kind of understood that, and they wanted to get down there quick too. So that not only could we bolster their numbers up, but also bolster our own, because I think we all were kind of halfway expecting to get hit on the way in there.
Yeah, I mean, that would have been based on the terrain. It would have been really, if I remember right, there was a thick tree line in front of us on the other side of that wall, and it was a perfect place for them to ambush us. And and we would have taken heavy casualties ourselves, just being out in the open the way that we were. So all of those things together really, like you said, come, and all of that information and understanding, what the situation was, led to making that movement essentially right where an enemy force would have wanted us to move.
So Clark steps on the IED. Describe, if you can, the next couple of moments as you recall.
You have the dust that just coats everything, and that thick layer of dust, and then the smell of HME and burning flesh. Those things all stay very vivid in the mind, even to this day. I can still smell that smell, and then I saw in just those few moments of confusion, I saw people make decisions. I saw men rush to the front. We were always taught, don't run toward an IED blast, right? But it wasn't people thinking about their own safety at that point. It was people thinking, somebody's hurt. I don't know who it is, but I'm going to go save. I'm going to go help them, and my life is not more important than theirs. And that's what I saw in just a split second. Luke, you ran up to the front. Tom Evans ran up to the front and started providing support to Clark before they even really knew who it was that was hit and what was going on. That willingness to run into danger for your comrades, that's something that I saw on display, not just that day, but every day after that, when we had issues that arose, when men's lives were in danger. Those were the type of decisions and reactions, and it has nothing to do with being reckless. It has everything to do with protecting your own.
So we're responding to a mass casualty event. We've just had our own, incident. At this time, medevac availability was very limited. Can you explain how you came about that information and what kind of workarounds we were able to find to get Clark out of there?
Obviously, with Charlie Company's casualties, there weren't a lot of resources available, and we actually ended up getting communication back that there was a group of PJs in the area that could provide support, and they were within that golden hour essentially to get Clark safely off the battlefield, and those guys responded. It wasn't their typical mission, but because of I think the resources that were watching from the Massamgar feed, um, it was essentially do whatever we can to get those guys out of there. Whatever resources we need to provide to make sure we save a life, we need to get it in, and that's what happened. We had that crew of PJs that came in, and were able to really get Clark out in a timely manner, so that he had a chance.
The HLZ that we had to get to, it wasn't exactly close.
No, it wasn't close. It wasn't ideal. It was the only place that we could possibly get a helicopter in there. If I remember right, it was maybe half a click away.
Yeah, I'd have to get on Google Earth and do some measuring, but it was far. Whether it was actually far or it was infantry far.
Infantry far, yeah. Or Grape Row far.
Grape Row far, right. What I remember distinctly is how, so I mean, Clark was severely injured. And this is kind of our chance to kind of let listeners understand how these blasts affect the body, because the idea is, oh, he stepped on a landmine and he lost a leg, but that's actually the lost leg was kind of the least severe of the injuries that he sustained in that incident. It would, in my observation at the time, and I think Clark would agree right now, the more severe injury was the shattering of his good leg, which made that movement. And it's, yeah, oh my gosh, I forgot about his hand. Yeah, and he lost a couple fingers on his hand. Luke, what do you remember about that movement to the LZ?
We were such a small force, and then two of our guys were out of commission because Holt was completely, his noodle was rocked, and so we were all trying to rotate in and out and moving Clark. Then another thing is, like, we were going up and over grape rows because we didn't have the option of walking the length of a grape row because of the way that everything kind of laid in there. So it was up and over grape rows to this HLZ. So every time we would move Clark and jostle him around, and he had this like terrible feeling, it's guilt of when he'd bang his wet leg or hit his hand on something, even though he was up in the, what was that thing called? The plastic thing.
The Skedco.
The Skedco, yeah. It was like, it was trying to get him to safety, but also causing him pain,
Yeah, I think that was the toughest thing for me, was trying to get him there quick, but knowing that you were kind of sacrificing his comfort a bit to move him fast.
Yeah.
Because the only way to move him without causing him pain would have been very, very slow, very, very deliberate. And like, it wasn't really an option. It's like, so, I think I even apologized. I was like, sorry, buddy, it's going to hurt.
And he was such a badass during all that. Like, he was
still is a badass.
He's still a badass, yeah. But he was such a badass the whole time. I mean, he was obviously in an immense amount of pain, but he was still like kind of cognizant and aware, and he was doing his part to make it as easy on us as he could, which speaks a lot to his character and his resiliency.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that I really take away from that experience was just how important it is to understand what sacrifices that guy in the front is making, and you're further back in the stack, and you worry about every step that you're taking, but you kind of have it in the back of your mind. Well, there's guys ahead of me and they've stepped there, so I can step there too.
Right.
But when you're up there up front, clearing the way Clark was clearing, um, he had his mine hound, and we've already joked about the accuracy of that particular piece of equipment, and the difficulty in understanding what is actually happening when it makes the noises that it makes. But um, you know, Clark was making that push. He was making that movement. He was making that sacrifice, knowing exactly what the stakes were personally for him, and he was doing that with full knowledge that if he stepped on something, he was likely to at least lose limbs, if not his own life.
Yeah.
And he was willing to do that and put himself in that position to try to save a life himself.
Yeah. And I'm pretty thankful that old Clarky got out of there. Yeah. Because I know that coming back from that, and that's not skipping the conversation about how he got back, because that was pretty brutal too. But that was pretty impactful on me personally. I know it was impactful on the platoon as well, because it, they always say that it always happens to the best person, and Clark was the best of us for sure.
Absolutely, he had a bright future in front of him, and you look at that sacrifice that he made, and know that he wasn't just sacrificing what was, but what could have been.
Sure.
Also. And all of us know that when you get hurt like that, your military career is essentially over, and rightly so. But he sacrificed a lot that day, and it was something that I think everybody took hard. It was something that I blamed myself for. It was difficult for me to come to terms with what had happened to one of the best of us, and it was difficult for a long time immediately after, but also lasting, to know just the impact that it would have moving forward for him. And at the time, I don't know that we even knew if he was going to make it. I know that was hard on everybody, not just his close friends in the squad, but also the entire platoon, and quite frankly, the entire company took it very difficult.
Yeah, I mean, it's when that happens, there's a significant delay between when the event happens and we get any kind of word back that what happened to them one way or the other. I mean, because they have a 20-minute flight to Kandahar, they get rushed into surgical, and at the time, we're in a Grape Row, exhausted, and it's on our minds. But now we're not thinking about that only. Now we're also thinking about how are we going to get our 6 remaining guys back up that awful movement that we had just rushed through. Because at this point, if I'm not mistaken, the mission to go save Charlie 123 was axed. They said, just go home.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a combination of the fact that we didn't have a bulldozer, which is something they needed, and we didn't have the people to be able to defend ourselves if we took contact, and then we didn't have the medical supplies if we had taken contact, or stepped on another IED, or whatever it was that could have happened to us. We didn't have the resources to be able to save ourselves. It would have essentially meant calling another unit out to come and save us.
Right.
And so yeah, we couldn't move forward. We had to essentially make that backtrack, ride it back out of there, and get home.
So that the events of that day, you had Boyce about a week before, and then we had Clark, and we did eventually find out later that I think even when we got back that he was stable, and that they were optimistic he was going to be okay. Um, and then it was just a few days after that that Perez got shot. It was a pretty rapid fire sequence of events. As a leader, how did you see how did that make you feel to see those rapid sequence of events, and then also what did you observe with the guys and how that affected them? Those three rapid fire events.
Yeah, I think as a leader, you take a lot of responsibility for what's happening. You take all the responsibility essentially when your soldiers are falling in front of you. You wonder, am I making the right decisions? And there's quite a bit of second guessing that goes into those decisions that you're making, especially when you've been making decisions and things are going good, and then you have uh, three quick incidents like that right in a row, and you start to really take a lot of blame. I think, for me at least, that's the way I saw it, and it was something that really put me in a difficult place mentally. It was a very dark place that I fell into uh, pretty quickly. Um, Something that really uh, I've never really actually discussed this with anybody, um, but I took those casualties uh, very seriously, and I started to second guess what I was doing, and started to second guess, is this right for me? Is this what I should be doing? Um, and it took some conversations with all levels, really, having discussions with the commander, discussions with squad leaders, discussions with soldiers, um, and understanding that uh, they still trusted me. They still uh, believed that what we were doing uh, was something that was worthwhile, and um, they were willing to do it with me um, as their leader, and that uh, really pulled me out of uh, a dark place. Um, those are difficult conversations to have sometimes, and initially, I think it was difficult to believe that what people were telling me was true. You know, but eventually, I came out of that that kind of funk that I was in, uh, because I believed in not just the mission that we had, but I believed in the platoon, and I believed in very strongly the soldiers and NCOs who were in front of me and behind me and beside me, and uh, and I saw their resiliency. I saw that they were resilient and were willing to continue to move forward, and so I made a decision, that I would continue doing it, I think that's one of those things that um, you don't know how difficult of a decision that is until you have to make it, and and uh, I think uh, it was the confidence of those around me that they still believed that I could lead that platoon, um, and that was what really drove me forward through those events.
And I think those are you're talking about something that we've talked a little bit about already, but one of the things about combat and the experience of combat, and especially as a leader, because you're all this is kind of enfolded even more so, is how complex it is in terms of the human element, in terms of the kind of functionality of it, the day-to-day grind, and something like somebody getting hit, especially getting shot or something like that, like Perez, getting shot or stepping on an IED. It's not something as simple as like a direct result of one's own decisions. It's a it's a compounding of a multitude of decisions from a bunch of different angles. And so whenever you were kind of going through this after Perez got hit, like were you having a more difficult time uh, realizing this complex web of things that result in these occasions? I mean, was that becoming more clouded, or did you always just try to? Was it always something that you just took upon yourself? Because you know, I think it's it's instinctual for us to want to, especially as a leader. It's something that you want to do. You want to take control of the situation, and that includes taking control of the negative, even though sometimes that negative maybe doesn't necessarily directly under your control or in your control. Am I making sense?
No, definitely. I understand what you're getting at. The that complexity and just because you know we decided to take a Minotaur through Sketcha, was that a decision that I made? And I think about all of the uh, complexity, like you're talking about, what all went into that action, and did I, place an IED over there? Did I know that IED was going to be there and Clark was going to step on it? No, absolutely not. And if I had, we would have done something completely different. And I think looking back at things, it is that whole hindsight is 2020, right? You look at the uh, at the action or the result, and you can easily tie that to a decision that was made in the moment. Uh, but you don't have that information until it happens, and it's that fog of war that really clouds some of that decision making. And when you get to that uh, place, I think it is like you're saying, Luke. It's understanding that um, you know you make the best decisions that you can, and if you're absolutely making you believe you can continue making good decisions, um, then you believe that you're going to put your men in the best place to accomplish the mission and get them home safely.
And so much of it is just luck, you know, or kind of like a controlled chaos in a way. Like it's that like I'm gonna pop a squat instead of standing, and then a few seconds later you take contact, or it's like this isn't a great spot. I want to shift over here, like these little minute things. But sometimes it's just bad luck. You round the corner and they're there, or whatever, or a news article sends you out on a mission where somebody gets shot in the arm, and so It's just there's so many things that are outside of our control, and it's nature. That's our human nature to want to control the chaos, to want to control things that don't make sense to us. And combat is definitely one of those things, I think. So you can implement a kind of a system that creates I don't say the illusion of control. It creates a minutia of control, but it doesn't ultimately account for happenstance and chance and luck. And those are such incredibly important components in someone getting wounded or killed. Bad luck or bad timing or whatever.
I mean, kind of speaking to the complexities, um, you know, you had an insight on all of this that none of us really had
Yeah.
as the platoon leader, and your ability to, as a function of your job, interacting with the locals and our Afghan partners. For Luke and I, and for the majority of the platoon, we were in a gunfight trying not to step on IEDs. But you had much more interaction with the locals as part of our feigned attempt to try and fight an insurgency. How how did that experience unfold for you?
I think kind of what Luke alluded to was, that mission that Perez got shot. We were looking for a kid who supposedly, his body was laying out in a field somewhere in our AO, and what was important about that is it was important to the people around us. It was important to the Afghan people who we were there not fighting against, but fighting for, essentially. And so, a lot of what we did um, was a little bit behind the scenes for you guys because, um, you know, we have a mission where we go and exploit an IED making facility, and we take a enemy combatant off the battlefield during that mission, and it just happens that a couple of days later we go visit the police chief in the bazaar, and we find out that this enemy combatant had killed his brother, and uh, and learning that type of information, and then embracing those people uh, in really the most vulnerable situations. Those were the things that we were out there fighting for. In reality, um, there's the mission where we um, we were bringing school supplies to Afghan children in a relatively safe area of our AO, and we find out there's a little girl there that needs medical attention, and then you do what you can to try to help that situation. All of these little pieces of information that uh, really were reasons for going out every day. It wasn't necessarily to get into a firefight. It was, can we find this little girl a doctor? Can we get these? Can we get these school kids the much needed supplies that they need so that uh, they can progress in life, not just from a physical standpoint of life, but can they learn and uh, and from an intellectual standpoint grow in this type of chaotic situation.
So, like, in addition to the Afghan civilians and your interactions with the local forces, we had a pretty unique relationship with the interpreters. There obviously, just like with everything else, there was a varying degree of quality of the interpreters. I mean, I think you even mentioned one barely even spoke Pashto. Um, but we had a pretty good relationship with Jay, and as the PL, like, it was a much more personal relationship because he was kind of at your side at all times. And how did those kind of relationships develop and work out for you?
Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, there was the interpreter that I spoke better Pashto than he did, and that was interesting. But yeah, you mentioned Jay, and um, I knew Jay was special when I first got there. In terms of his ability, but also in terms of how much he cared. It's that care factor that I think was the real difference maker when it came to our interpreters. And Jay had it. Jay really cared about what he was doing, and not only that, he cared about the people in Panjwai, and he cared about the American soldiers too.
Yeah, we trusted Jay. You know, I think that's one of the reasons that even us, like as Joes and as and as just grunts, we trusted him. You know, and that's not a usual relationship with Terps. And you're lucky if you can trust your Terp, and we trusted Jay.
Absolutely. The day before we lost Jay, not lost him as in he didn't die, but we sent him away on a helicopter. He and I had a conversation. This was before the mission that I affectionately call crotch kick, um, because it really was for us. It was a kick in the crotch. But um, Jay and I had a conversation, and I had just found out that my wife and I, Lauren, were uh, in the process of adopting children, and we had found out that we had referrals for two infants in Ethiopia, twins, um, and I was excited, but I was also really nervous about um, moving forward because what am I doing this for if I'm going to leave two kids who are already orphans, without a father. And I stopped and I talked to Jay that night about the mission, and and he reminded me, you know, we're doing this for them. We're doing this for the kids, and Jay had kids back home also, um, and he really uh, recentered me and refocused me on the purpose of what we were doing, and he told me, "You're gonna make it out. I know you are. You're gonna make it out alive, and those kids are gonna have a dad." And um, and that really solidified, I think, my loyalty to him. So when we went on uh, crotch kick the next day, um, Jay was right there with me, like always. He was by my side. It was me and Jay and Boyce, and we were a team. We were the leadership team essentially, and he was an extension of me and my ability to communicate with our Afghan forces as well as the locals. Um, when we pushed up, uh, we started to get radio contact that we had enemy in the area, and we were going to maneuver on them, which is something that we didn't have the ability to do very often. But in that situation, there was an ability for us to get into a better tactical position and maneuver on the enemy. We set up basically an L formation with uh, half the uh, platoon heading north on line, uh, and the other half of the platoon uh, on line facing what would have been east, and we were going to move in on this position. When we started taking contact, and we were in a perfect tactical position to move and being able to maneuver on the enemy. At that point, Sergeant Akoa and I moved up the left flank, and we were moving towards the front. And Boyce was right there with me, and all of a sudden in the rear, there was an explosion, and I knew when I walked past the spot where that explosion happened. I knew it when I saw it. This is no good, no bueno.
Yeah.
Don't go there.
It was another gap in a wall, if I recall correctly.
Gap in the wall, exactly. And we moved past that gap, but our Afghan forces did not. And we had an Afghan soldier who stepped on an IED.
It was a large one. It was really a big explosion. While we're talking now, we'll have that video up because we have the dust cloud and what happened immediately after.
I looked back and I saw this soldier. We were in contact. We were taking fire from the enemy at that point, and I saw this soldier pop up and run across the engagement area, essentially, straight towards that dust cloud. He had no clue who it was, what their issue was. He just did what had come to be the norm with the platoon. You run towards the danger, not away from it.
And that was one of the American soldiers, one of
Absolutely.
our soldiers.
One of our soldiers. It was Smothers. When I got up to back to that position, and Smothers was there working on this Afghan soldier before anybody else even knew what was going on. That type of action is, like I said, what had come to be the norm for the platoon, and it's not normal to be valorous in that way that Smothers was that day, but it was normal for us to react that way. So when I say it's normal, it's by no means a normal thing to do. It goes against everything that we as humans know, right? It's flight or fight, right? And running towards the danger, that is the definition of a valorous action.
Yeah. The striking thing to me from that video is that explosion goes off and he's 50 meters away. He's not anywhere near it. He's totally safe. And as he's running towards the site, he's yelling, "Who's hit? Who's hit?" He didn't wait to know who was hit before he decided to make that action. He just, for all he believed, it was any one of us, any one of the EOD guys, any one of the ANA. He just picked up his feet and ran and figured out the information along the way because it didn't matter to him. I'm sure there were guys on the platoon he didn't like. It could have been any of them, but he wasn't basing his reaction on who it was. He was moving no matter what.
Absolutely, and it's immediate when you see the video. He's up and he's moving as fast as he could go.
Yeah, that's a video that I'm glad I have, for one. It's a video that I've shown people at other points in my career as kind of an expectation management for what an injury like that looks like and what it's like to treat an injury like that. And the comment that usually I get when I start that video is, holy shit. Like, because Smothers, he's up and he's gone. Like, it's instantaneous, and he's right into that dust cloud. And there's obviously lots of aspects of that video that are great learning points for paramedics or combat medics or just normal infantrymen about what to expect with an injury like that. But the immediate reaction from everybody is always, holy shit, like regarding Smothers' response.
Yeah. Yeah, it is extraordinary what he did. I think what's also important to note about that was the injury to Jay, and Jay. My understanding was that he was with me. That's what I thought. When I moved, he moved, and for some reason, in that moment, Jay hung back. He actually stopped and stayed right at that gap. And when those Afghan soldiers moved through that gap, Jay took a pretty good brunt of the blast. Not shrapnel or anything. Something had obviously hit him in the head, because his head was he had definitely taken a knock to the head, and he was swollen. And when I got back there, he was in tears, and and he grabbed me and he looked me in the eye and he said, I need to go. I need to go. And I remembered that conversation from the night before, him telling me, you're going to make it. And I didn't know the extent of his injuries, but I knew I needed to get him on a helicopter and get him out. And it's not typically what happens with our Afghan interpreters. They don't get that same that same level of care that even the ANA soldier. We were loading him on an American helicopter, but we were able to get Jay on the bird, and when he flew away, I never saw or heard from him again.
We do know that he survived, that his wounds were not fatal. I believe it was just a very severe TBI. But unfortunately, that Afghan soldier did not make it.
He did.
So, I mean, which I guess kind of speaks a little bit to the futility of combat just in general. I mean, a lot of work and heart and soul went into helping that guy. But it for sure wasn't, completely futile. But I think it just kind of adds to that feeling of all the effort that was placed into saving him.
And I think with us, I as well have shared that video with people over the years in different contexts. I think he gave his life, but others have learned and have been able to learn from that video and learn from that situation. And I don't think he gave his life in vain.
I would agree. And we're not going to show that whole video. It's way too graphic. But the summary there was that he sustained a wound to his lower body, in addition to the amputation of his leg, that was extremely difficult to treat. He was bleeding profusely from the hip, which is possibly one of the worst places to get injured. So the learning point there being teaching medics, infantrymen, paramedics, anybody to do that complete check, which they did, which Salvador and Smothers did. Unfortunately, it just wasn't a survivable wound, and it's just kind of a lesson that even a blast. We had how many 9-10 guys on our deployment lose legs and not sustain an injury like that. and potentially that was our ballistic underwear or our diapers that prevented wounds like that. But it's a good lesson, and I think you're right. I think in hindsight, and I hadn't considered it from that perspective before, that the number of times that video has been shared, that there's a very real potential that somebody's life was saved because of a lesson they learned from that video.
Absolutely.
So I don't remember specifically when that was in the deployment, and it's not super important when it was, because the act itself is so noteworthy. But as we started to reach the end of the deployment, there, I think good listeners at this point are starting to observe that a lot of these stories we're talking about are from Najat, from an area that we called Najat, which probably actually wasn't called Najat, but that's another topic for another episode, about the names of villages in Panjwai. But we started to get rumblings that we were going to go back to Najat in a big way. And when did you start to hear that was a real thing and that it was going to be kind of a big deal?
Really, end of September, we started to get information about some IED making facilities in the Najat area. Pretty good intel that we could, in fact, identify a couple of places that we believe to be IED making facilities in Najat. That led to a series of missions, and culminating in the mission beginning of October, Throat Chop. We made a big push right before that mission, and took one of the IED making facilities out of play. And then shortly after that, we are assaulted into Najat on what is come to be known, I think, is the culminating mission of the deployment, essentially. Big push across, clearing essentially the entire Najat area. 3rd Platoon identified another IED making facility on day 1, where we had an epic battle, and fought a significant number of insurgents from a lot of different positions, and we sustained heavy casualties. Luke, being one of those, was medevaced day 1, I believe, and not. I'll let you kind of tell. Yeah, not a physical injury, but an injury just as important.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we want to keep honing back in on over the course of this podcast is the effect of that daily grind, And I think everybody has these moments where it breaks them, and some people break, and some people can't come back from that. And that's fine. But yeah, we were, excuse me, we were on this patrol, and we were this first day of the mission. We had been fighting all day. We, due to some maneuverability errors and some leadership, we ended up having to essentially give up all the ground we had just fought, to take. And then we had to then push back across that ground to reconnect with the 3rd Platoon and the company. And I thought it was just kind of like this. I had this moment earlier in the day where we were getting shot at out there on the road, and I just kind of got fed up with it. I sat down behind a tire after a little lull in the firefight. We started getting shot at again, and I remember I stood up, and like my entire psyche just kind of emptied, and I just became more mechanical. And I remember walking out in the open, not running to cover, and just walking and shooting at everything in sight. And that was kind of like an odd moment for me. And then we pushed south later on in the day to link up with the company. And when we got in there, and I think if we would have stayed, I would have probably been fine for that next day. Because we were essentially, I thought, my impression is that we were about to bunker down and set up the patrol base for the night. And we got the order to go back to the north, to the village that we had just got done clearing and fighting in all day, because of this air maneuverability from people in the company. And so we started to push back out. And on our way back out, I was clearing. Curtis and I had switched out on clearing that day a little bit, I think, in my memory. It was kind of an odd day in terms of who cleared. It was very slow and methodical, but I started pushing back out and clearing, and I had my eyes down on the minesweeper trying to get us out of that village and back into this cornfield to push into the southern end of that chunk of clots that we had just cleared earlier in the day. And this dog came out of a gap up to my left and started yapping at me. And of course it wasn't this registration of, oh, that's a dog that's barking at me. It was that instantaneous moment of movement in my peripheral, and I thought I was dead. I thought for sure that somebody had me dead to rights from just a few feet away, and I was going to die. And I turned, and it's this fucking dog barking at me. And I kind of turned back away from it, and then it kind of scuttled around, and it came back, started barking at me again. And I got so angry. I just had this well of hatred in me, and I shot it. I shot this dog, and it started squalling and taking off. And then the owner came out and gave me the big stink eye or whatever. And as we began to push north, and we pushed into these grape rows, I think, and it was this weird sensation where, I know it's kind of funny because we're talking about fighting and shooting and having these gun battles and stuff, but I'm a pretty chill guy. I'm not a very violent guy. And to have initiated violence upon something that was completely innocent, more or less, in that situation, was like the catalyst for everything of the previous 6 months. And as I was moving along, it was like everything that I had either tried to suppress or everything that I had tried to deal with in my mind just collapsed in on me all at the same moment. That and everything from that previous, the engineers, Clark, Perez, like all this stuff, the close calls that we had, that I'd had, and I just collapsed. And I started bawling. I was crying my eyes out, and I couldn't control myself. And I went down to my knees, and I was just shaking and crying. And so I kind of got that out of my system, and I was really rattled, and I was really conflicted. And I was talking to Dennison and Evans about it, and I was like, I didn't know what to do because I felt that I couldn't do my job. I grabbed the Minehound, and I cleared us back up to 2nd Platoon. They came in on the trucks, and I even remember pushing out there being like a very obvious IED, and I was like spray painting it, and I was like, whatever, pass it down the line, don't step in IED. And I had this weird moment of gathering myself again. And then we got back to the trucks, and it was getting towards the end of the day, and Dennison was like, are you sure? Are you sure that you want to go? And he put me on the truck, and I could see it in my mind right now. I can see it so clearly that if I could draw, I could draw every detail for you, even the lighting. I remember, and the ramp's raising, and Dennison's locking eyes with me, and it's not get the fuck out of here. It's not any kind of contention at all. It was just genuine concern and genuine love, I think. And when that ramp closed, I took my helmet off, and it was a terrible thing to feel like I was letting everybody down, and also understanding that I couldn't be out there. And So they closed the ramp and they took me back to Sperwangar, and then I went back there and just hung out. And the next day, when all that shit was going down, I was sitting there at the cop, and when I heard Denison got hit, it just, I don't know, man. It was a terrible realization to understand the limitations of my own mind, and to know that I had picked probably the worst time in the deployment to quit. And when all that shit went down the next day, it was just like this weight, this gravity sunk into the core of my being. And I hated myself for it, and I hated that I couldn't be there with them fighting. And so, after that, from then on in the deployment, I didn't let it. I fucking pushed, and I was not gonna have that moment happen again. And I just switched into this completely different gear as a human being, where my self-preservation and my sense of like wanting to make sure that I was safe and things like that started to filter away and go out the window, and it turned into this desire to just fucking be there and to fight. And I tried to fight hard for the rest of that time going forward. I tried to fight hard. And it was like I had to compensate for that. I had to make up for that failure. So yeah, I was essentially medevaced for mentally breaking. And, I'm glad I came back from it. I'm glad I didn't quit and for the rest of the deployment. I'm glad I was there for the tail end. But that was a hard thing for me to walk away from. It was a hard experience to just deal with. And the biggest thing for me is like that image of Denison with his legs standing. That was the last time I saw him until we got back. So yeah, that was a part of that story of throat chop for me. Anyways, that was my story in that regard. Yeah,
It's that love and respect. I think all of us felt the same way for you. It was surreal to see soldier after soldier after soldier on that mission be taken away, either in a truck, on a helicopter. Um, it literally was one after the next that went down. We fought hard. You both fought hard. Uh, Curtis ended up taking some rounds to his backpack for some fellow soldiers, and I know he would have taken those rounds to his body if he had to, and those types of things were it wasn't us clearing the jot, it was us fighting for each other on that mission.
And I think it's important. I know this, and I think Luke knows this, but I don't think you had a choice. You were going home no matter what. That wasn't your decision.
No, and it wasn't. I don't see you as quitting. I didn't see it at that time. I don't see it today. It was something that needed to happen for. It was best for you that day to to go back and be able to
I hope so.
get recentered and refocused.
You're right. I mean, throat chop, day one was no one got seriously hurt. We had some TBIs and some concussions. And I think as a result of day one, I think we ended up having to send 4 people back to the rear. Yeah. Which left us pretty shorthanded. Not like Clark's day where we were vulnerably shorthanded, and we still had probably a squad plus for the platoon. plus a bunch of ANA. So we weren't undergunned by any means on that day. It's still probably 40 people, large element, just very few Americans. So we pushed. The short story, because this battle will be told many, many times through many viewpoints. But we pushed east through the heart of Najat, while 3rd Platoon pushed south on the bottom edge of Najat. And they got into some stuff too, so it wasn't just us that day. And as we approached the final town, we had been getting into these fights and skirmishes with them the day before. There was only one place that they could go. We had blocking positions to the north and the south. The only place and to the west. We had some guys from 123, the scout platoon, to the west. So they couldn't go west. They had to be going east. And there was kind of a backstop there too. And there was that hardball road and then an A&P checkpoint there. So we all knew that we were pushing into a fight of some sort, whether it was an IED belt or a gunfight. Turns out it was both. So as we pushed through that final clot right before that, the town we really considered in Jot, that last clot right before the road, did we have any indication that we were about to get into it?
Yeah. I mean, your backpack getting shot up was a good indication we were about to get into it. I don't know that any of us knew how heavy a fight that was going to be. But one thing we did know was that we were about to get into it. And Dennison was clearing. He insisted he was going to clear. He had the Minehound. Tom Evans was right behind him. Then it was Nagurn, and then I was right behind Nagurn. We started moving into that last village, and I saw PKM. First, I saw a head pop up, which I thought I'd never seen a single human being in the Jot ever. That wasn't trying to shoot at me. So that was one. And then I saw the PKM pop up on the wall, and we hit the dirt. I don't know how we weren't dead, because we were 15 meters from the guy, and we got into it. Then the four of us jumped over a wall and took cover, and then we heard Akoa's hit, then Lloyd's hit.
I forgot that Lloyd got hit too. I totally forgot about that.
Took shrapnel from an RPG.
Yeah.
And then ANA soldier was hit, and we couldn't just hold still behind that wall. And Dennison popped over, Evans popped over, Nagurn popped over, I popped over, and we got into it then. And it was heavy fighting it wasn't a long battle, but it was 15, 20 minutes, culminating in
the
Apaches lighting it up with Hellfire missiles, if I remember right.
It was rockets and 30 at our targets. Later in the day, they engaged, I think after we left, or just to the northwest, they hit something with the Hellfire, but the village cluster that they were engaging near us, they were putting 30 and rockets down. And at this time, you guys were up front in a position to fight, but almost the entire platoon is inside a marijuana field. And we have video from Todd's helmet cam of hearing your gunfight up front, but we're completely powerless to do anything because we have no idea where you are. We can't shoot blindly through the middle of a marijuana field. So we're on our faces, just staying low. When you hear that video, there's a couple real close ones. But I mean, it was, decent size exchange of gunfire, a lull, decent size exchange of gunfire, a lull. And I think pretty much the entire time, up to and including while that helicopter was on the ground picking a Koa up, I mean, they were shooting at that. They shot at that helicopter while it was on the ground. You can hear it in the video. So, I mean, that was just to get into that village cluster. I mean,
and what we didn't realize was we were fighting into, like you said, an IED belt.
Yeah.
I think as we started to move in, there were places that we could have moved into pretty easily, but we kept getting hits on the mine hand,
mm-hmm.
and we were not going to move into that village hastily, especially knowing what we had seen in other situations. When you move fast, you move into IEDs, and we moved in and we cleared that village safely. It was deliberate, it was slow, but
we had to move into the southern portion of the village, if I remember correctly. The northern part was just completely off limits. I mean, if we managed to hit a couple on the south, I would imagine every intersection, every wall in that north part was probably just full of
them. After we cleared that village, I got word from Robbins that a small element had moved out, and not knowing where they were going, I ran up to see where they were going, see who is it and where are they heading to. We moved across a field, or they moved across the field, and I caught up to them as we got to the other side of the field, and one popped around the corner, the next, and then the next, and then as I started to round that corner, IED went off, and all hell broke loose from that perspective of when an IED goes off, you don't know who it is, you don't know where they are, what's going to happen next. And
I mean, it's worth noting at this point, it's only 5 of you up there. Yeah. Because the rest of the element was kind of back still in the village, and I believe the plan was you were going to clear the way out and then come back and grab us and show us the way. So it was you, Dennison, Evans, Nagurn, Stefan, and Captain Kitchen. So six of you alone, outside of our visual range. So we knew where you were, but we could not see you.
And at that point, it was end of the day. My radio, I didn't realize it until I tried to call back to the unit, to the rest of you, and my radio wouldn't key, and I looked down, and my battery had a hole in it, and
it had been shot.
I don't know how it got a hole in it, but it was gone. And so I knew somebody was down as I moved up to that ditch. There was Dennison in the water. The physical specimen that he was doing a push-up to keep his face out of the water. He was on his hands pushed all the way up, and Stefan and I jumped down into the water and started pulling him out. Once again, the physical specimen that he helped us by placing his hands on the edge of the bank and lifting himself up onto the edge of the bank. As we got him out of the water, both of his legs were mangled. One of his legs was completely gone. The other one was uh, was going to be gone soon. Stefan and I threw tourniquets on, and at that point, Tom helped us pull him out up off the riverbank or that creek bank, and
Tom wasn't in great shape himself.
Tom asked me, "Hey, sir, what does my face look like?" And I said, "Oh, you look great." And he didn't. He had basically uh, had his nose ripped off. He looks beautiful today.
Yeah.
And I don't know who did that work on him, but yeah, he was messed up, and tears coming out of his eyes. He was uh, helping us put Dennison back together, telling me and Stefan what to do, and the three of us worked on him, and with Tom's help, we saved his life.
Did you hear the second explosion? Did you even know that had happened, or were you so...
I knew exactly what happened because when I saw Dennison in the water, I yelled for a medic because my radio wouldn't key.
Yeah.
And when that IED went off again, I knew exactly who it was. I knew Todd had been hit. He was once again the type of person who would run across the minefield to save a buddy, and that's what he did.
Literally. Yeah. There was no delay between that medic call and Todd running. There was definitely a delay after the explosion, because it, like we've talked about it before, there's that moment of silence and like absolute freeze. Like everyone just freezes, and you're listening because you're trying to hear somebody call for medic or listen to the radio, or in your heart you're hoping that someone just shot a 203, shot a grenade, or it was an RPG from the A&A or something like that, which it usually was. But it was so big we kind of knew. But we were just kind of hoping maybe it had accidentally set off, or Taliban had set his own IED off, which also happened. But when you called medic, he was gone. And I watched him round the corner through the same intersection you guys had just walked through, had just cleared through. But he took that one step different than the six of you and Roberts, who was in that intersection on a different part of it. He was standing maybe 6 feet away from where it happened. He just happened to take that step, and then it was just a puff of smoke. And then the ANA started to panic. They were all over the place, just because now they're freaked out. Now 2 IED blasts just went off in 30 seconds. They think they're standing in the middle of a belt, which for us meant we froze. For them, they panic and they start moving around. But we weren't. We kind of knew, because like again, in your heart, it just happened, but you don't accept it until you hear someone call for medic, which it was kind of the same thing. But the problem there is we did have 2 medics. We had Doc Salvador with us as well, but now there's no medic for us to send up to Dennison. Plus, like you said, now we have to slow down because rushing just got us a second casualty. So we didn't know what the situation was up with you guys at all, but we knew we had one guy that had stepped on an IED for sure. We knew that for sure. So we had Doc Salvador to work on him, which makes it even more incredible what Tom was doing up there as the only medical qualified person up there. I mean, he's a paramedic on the civilian side before he joined the military. So he's it. He's all you guys have. We don't have another medic to spare. In hindsight, obviously we would have sent Salvador forward because Dennison was the more serious of the 2 casualties. I mean, his wounds were much more serious than Todd's. I mean, Todd still lost a leg, but it was he basically lost his foot and they had to take the leg kind of thing. But yeah, it's just complete and utter chaos.
It was chaos. But Dennison lived.
They did. Todd lived.
Todd lived. With Evan's help, we were able to get him patched up, and then medevac came in. That was the first time I saw you, and you were carrying Todd. I don't remember who else was there, but I just remember seeing you on the other side of the helicopter, and we loaded Dennison, Evans, and the Gurn on that bird, and away they went to CAF.
I was able to track down a lot of the pilots that flew over top of us, Kiowas, Apaches. I still haven't tracked down the crew of that medevac, but one of their medics got out and I think helped. I remember he got out on one of the, so they landed and they didn't take any casualties. They let the medic off and he helped. I don't know if he was ever awarded anything, but I sure hope he was, because that's not something that Army medics do. They're not supposed to do that. That's like a PJ thing to get off the bird. They are supposed to stay on that aircraft. So seeing that was was super impressive. In addition to the parking job that they did with that Black Hawk, which I don't like to give Black Hawk pilots a lot of credit, but it was damn impressive.
Yeah.
So we had this pretty. I mean, and at that point, we're stuck. We don't have any mine detector. It just got blown up with Dennison's legs. Our non-commissioned officer corps just got gutted. We had Lloyd. That was it.
Sergeant Lloyd was, with his shrapnel injury, was the platoon sergeant on the ground.
Yep, and the only remaining NCO. And we had to be rescued, which is kind of embarrassing to admit. But we couldn't move. We had no idea if there were any more IEDs. We had to assume that there were. And I can't remember I think it was the same scouts that had to come in and escort us out. And we were maybe 50 meters, 100 meters away from the end of our mission.
Yeah, if you remember, we actually consolidated in that field between the spot where where Dennison was hit and where Todd was hit. We consolidated there, and at that point, we jumped down into the shit creek and walked out down that creek, because
we couldn't get back up the other bank.
There was no way we were going on any land in that area. If we were going to get out of there, it was going to be through the creek. And when we got to the other side, there was Lieutenant Colonel Rutherford pulling guys out. That was the most amazing thing that I think I've ever seen a leader do. I don't know what or who convinced him to do that, or if it was by his own volition, but to see that man there at the end of that mission pulling us out of the water was I would fight for him any day. Yeah. And solidified my will to continue fighting.
Yeah, and so for the listeners that don't maybe recognize that name, that is the battalion commander for 1st and 23rd Infantry. He is standing outside of a secured area, maybe about 10 meters outside of a secured area, where we had just taken sustained contact for the better part of 2 hours. And he's largely by himself. I mean, he's got a couple of his guys out there with him, but he's a huge target. And he's Matt's not kidding, by himself, physically pulling each of our soldiers out of the ground, or not the ground, out of the water, and pointing them to the checkpoint. I agree. It's the most incredible thing I've ever seen an Army leader do, hands down. And There's no limitation to the amount of respect I have for him because of that.
Yeah.
And it's a limited interaction, so who knows? Maybe his guys hated him for other stuff that he did, but that day on that moment, there it was incredible. And he was our battalion commander. He was our battalion commander. Like Armstrong in CAF was like a stepdad or something.
Yeah, he was not our battalion commander. I think we looked to Rutherford for that.
So we reconsolidate inside the Najat checkpoint. We get everybody back inside. Everyone is absolutely devastated. Not emotional at this point. Just kind of like shell shock. I mean, it's absolute immediate post-traumatic stress. While the trauma is still ongoing, we have no idea how any of those guys are doing. But we're not home yet. We're still in Najat. We're just inside concrete walls. And there's not enough vehicles to get us all back. Do you remember the logistical conversation about getting us back to Sperwangar and what the options presented were at that point?
If I remember right, it was the scouts were going to take us back, and I thought to myself, no armor guy is going to take me anywhere right now. Honestly, I don't remember who took us back, but
I think it was a mix.
It was a mix of whoever they could get there to get us off the ground, and we weren't on the radio. We were done.
Yeah, we were passengers.
We were passengers. We were crew.
I remember I rode back in an EOD truck with Russ and his guys. There may have been one or other two people, and I still had Todd's gun strapped to my backpack. And that drive back was extremely nerve-wracking because I knew every stretch of that road, and even though I couldn't see it because I was inside this buffalo, I'm like, oh god, I've got to get through this S curve that goes over the creek because that's the most likely ambush point. When we get past that, when we make our left turn, I'll start to feel better, but we get lit up on brown all the time. It's like I'm a passenger, and like the dismounted mission is over, but I'm not out of the game yet. I have not allowed myself to relax yet until I'm at Sperwangar. And until I felt the rumble strips of us going over the ECP into Sperwangar that was when I was like, okay, we're good. And seeing Lieutenant Colonel Rutherford pulse out of the creek was one immense emotional experience for that day. But by far, and it takes a lot to exceed that, but it was bested by what I saw when the ramp dropped on the Buffalo and the Strikers, and to see every single soldier on Sperwangar that wasn't on the mission. So the 3rd platoon guys that had already gotten back, the 2nd platoon guys that didn't go, Luke, Nintz, like every single soldier running out, and they're grabbing weapons and they're grabbing packs and they are taking our armor off and carrying it in for us. I've never experienced anything like that before or since. To see dozens of people running out for the smallest gesture of just bringing you home.
Yeah. And for me, I think, for you stepping out of the trucks and I was moving to you and having been there for that whole day and watching, hearing all this unfold by hearsay while I'm sitting around just pacing the floor waiting on all this, and I see Curtis and we kind of lock eyes, and I'm thankful to you for what you said to me, because I think it's helped me in the long run to come to terms with my choices and the consequences of my actions the day prior, not having been out there for that fight. Because the first thing you said, we hadn't seen each other in almost 24 hours, and I know the day you had, and you said it's not your fault. It's it's like it's okay. And we hugged, and I could, what's weird about that moment is I still can smell how disgusting you smelled. But I gave you a hug. You hadn't even had your helmet off yet, and you told me like you knew. I think you already knew that that was gonna bother me. That was already messing with my mind. And for you to have the foresight and the wisdom to beat me to the punch and not let me start to implode, saved me from a lot of the fallout of that. And so that gave me that. It kind of helped me to realize like it wasn't okay, but it was okay in that for someone who was in the thick of it wasn't gonna be begrudgingly kind of accepting me there or whatever. It was an important pivotal moment for me, not just in regard to that event, but in regard to the deployment. Because without that moment, I don't think I'm not sure. I mean, we hear say we could, woulda, coulda, shoulda kind of thing doesn't really get you far, but it would have been more difficult for me to come out strong in the back end of that without that recognition from you.
Well, it still holds true. I mean, more boots on the ground that day means more IEDs that we stepped on. I mean, having a slimmer, trimmer element, I think, was actually a good thing on that day. So we got back. Normal end of mission stuff with all kinds of abnormal aspects to it. We've been gone for 2 days. We're disgusting. Everyone needs showers. But there's a lot of questions still. How is Todd? How is Dennison? Nintz had the answers to those for us almost immediately. As soon as we walked in the door, he's like, they're good. They're in surgery and everything's, they made it safe, back to CAF at least, and prognosis is good. So that's a huge weight off all of our backs. In probably the next 24 hours, 48 hours, we're physically resetting from the mission, restocking ammunition, restocking equipment, getting new mine hounds because we blew them all up. But for you, Matt, you're watching this unfold both as a leader and also as someone who's kind of a little bit more connected into what the plan is going forward. So could you shed a little light as to what you saw in the days and weeks after Throat Chop and the effect it had on the guys and their ability to continue to fight? Because we still had another 2 months.
Yeah, there's still plenty of fighting left to do from Sparwengar, and we needed to come back from that. People needed to talk about it. I knew that there were a lot of aspects of that mission that needed to be discussed, and quite frankly, we were scheduled to patrol the next day. We were scheduled to patrol to dangerous location where we took contact on a regular basis, and I am grateful for an NCO who recognized what needed to happen and went outside the chain of command to get what we needed done. We needed help. We needed to see combat stress. We needed to see the chaplain. We needed to talk about it, and we needed a couple days to process what had happened. And Sergeant Nakoa went to Sergeant Major of not the battalion of Third ID, and communicated that something that I think is very unique to the NCO Corps, and being able to get things done that need to get done. And Sergeant Major tracked me down and asked if who was this Sergeant Akoa coming to.
And for our non-military listeners, this is potentially a career ender for Sergeant Akoa to go completely outside of his chain of command, to bypass company, battalion, brigade, and go straight to the division command sergeant major and make a statement like that. If he had been wrong or out of bounds in his request to do what he did, The name Sergeant Akoa would be the name of somebody who was removed from their post and sent home. Like it was one or the other. He was either going to be successful in his endeavor to get his guys a breather, and get them help, or his career was going to be over.
And he took that chance, and it paid off for him. It paid off not for him, because it didn't advance his career. It paid off for the platoon, because Sergeant Major tracked me down and asked, "Is this true? Is this what you guys need?" And I said, "Absolutely, it is. It's what I've requested." And we got it. We got a couple days. We got chaplains and combat stress teams, and we got what we needed to process. And then I saw something amazing happen. I saw soldiers who had been through some of the most horrific trauma pull themselves up and go out and fight, and not just fight a little bit, not go on these easy missions or go play patty cake. It was getting, as we say, getting after it.
Yeah.
Right. And they were doing that on a daily basis then for the rest of the deployment.
I mean, if my memory serves correctly, we about a week and a half later we pushed in a jot again from a different angle and grabbed a guy and a whole bunch of intelligence on a night mission that was nobody wanted to go on, but we did it. And then we bombed Najat a few days later, which was glorious. Here's the video of it. Sorry, I don't care if it's classified. It's awesome. And we got in some really good fights. But what the switch that kind of turned on after that point is we kind of took the position as a platoon, or as a company, actually, really. We started to control the battlefield. We were making movements that were at night, or more tactful, and putting ourselves in a position to kind of catch the Taliban by surprise. And from that point on, I don't think we ever got caught with our pants down. We kind of dictated the terms of the battlefield to the east of Sperwangar from that moment on.
We essentially we figured out how to get into position to force them to come out and fight us, instead of us walking into them like we had been doing.
Yeah. That's how it felt, at least.
Yeah, I mean, it felt that way.
Yeah.
And we had some reinforcements. We had some guys that helped out. One of the biggest ones, Sergeant Service. May he rest in peace.
May he rest in peace. Yes. For those who don't know, Sergeant Service unfortunately perished in a car accident. Just a couple years after we redeployed back from Afghanistan. So,
great dude.
Absolutely, he was one of the keys to being able to continue to fight and push against the Taliban in that area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he had a fight in him, and he also understood that we were hitting our lick in terms of how we were working too. So he fit right into how things were ticking. He handled that well, actually, considering the fallout that he was coming in to fill. He handled it very well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, as you kind of mentioned, Throat Chop was kind of the culminating mission for the deployment. We had some good fights after that, as I said, and I actually remember those mostly fondly because we kind of had the upper hand on those. But kind of fast forward, we came home, and it's kind of standard that you start to see issues with guys on that redeployment. So they say like that first 90 days is when everyone's going to crash their motorcycle, beat their wives, or whatever. And there's a lot of truth to it, honestly. But even before we deployed, I mean, how were you seeing the effects of not just Throat Chop, but the entire deployment on your guys?
There were those incidents. Guys couldn't come to work, or I saw not just from our platoon, but from other platoons within the company. You know, they were deeply affected by it. I was deeply affected by what was happening and or what had happened, and it took me a while to admit to it. I know guys were having nightmares. I was having nightmares. I know people were avoiding talking about certain things and avoiding different different triggers, you know, that bring back memories. And I think those first 90 days is kind of it's you don't really get to a point where there's anything, you know, completely just mind shattering, right? It's as that time goes by and you're sitting on a tank, you know, 8 months later. Don't ask me why I was sitting on a tank, but I was once again, battalion commander thought it was funny for an infantry officer to be on a tank. But
Well, I believe at this point they had repealed "Don't Ask, Don't Tell."
yeah,
So.
yeah. You know, you're sitting on a tank and you're having flashbacks. You know, the explosions, the gunfire. It's all real, and it takes you back, and all of those feelings that you felt in the moment are present once again. You know, we within almost a year of redeploying, we're gearing up for a rotation at if I remember, JRTC, and the battalion was deploying to Camp Shelby to play Op 4, and at that time, the effects of PTSD were running rampant within not just Bravo Company, but everybody who trickled out from there. I found myself sitting in a culvert one night with my M9, thinking of a way that I could get rounds so I could blow my brains out. And those types of things, those types of experiences don't go away. And as you avoid what you need to avoid to live life, it just becomes more painful. And you get to a point where you can't breathe. You know, you're thinking about everything that happened, and you see Clark and he's alive, but you still blame yourself for what happened to him. You see all these guys in Denison having a life outside of the military, but when you see them, all you can see is that guy in the ditch, and how scared you are. Is he going to live? Is he going to make it? And those feelings all come back, and they're just as real as the moment when they happened.
I think a lot of people misinterpret post-traumatic stress as shell shock, and like, oh, you hear an explosion or you hear something loud, or um, kind of a lot of the typical, a lot which are real symptoms. They're not but the most powerful thing for me personally is, like you're saying, it's the feelings, the emotion, the it's not it's a flashback, but it's not, but it's like a flashback of that feeling and being in that moment again. That's far more powerful than, jumping because somebody skipped a rock across a lake, or someone found a roll of bubble wrap and thought it was funny to pop it all at once. um, yeah, I think that's what's, and post-traumatic stress takes a lot of different forms, and people process it a lot differently. Um, but I think for a lot of our guys, especially the ones that have taken a little bit longer to realize that there's an issue, because they didn't have some of those more um, topical symptoms of post-traumatic stress, they thought they were good. And I think it's really important to highlight that uh, there's stuff brewing under the surface, and it's okay to seek help and to talk about that stuff.
I mean,
Absolutely.
fuck 90 days, man. It's taken me 8 years, to realize that there's symptoms that I exhibit that I maybe originally thought not. And another thing, for me, it's like between our last firefight and my last day in the Army, it was only like 60 days. So when we got back, I was elated. So I was on this high for months and months and months, and I started dating my now wife. So it was in the beginning of our relationship, and I was going to school. I was living all these dreams that I had dreamt about for 2.5 years out of my 4.5 year contract. So I was, I just shed it off for such a long time, and these memories and these moments didn't really start to creep into my, into my mind until years later, and then even just in the past couple of years, things have more prevalence, and things that maybe, it's not really like the almost getting shot or the sounds like Curtis was saying, that kind of immediate stuff. It's that underlying undercurrent stuff that surges up in those moments, and it just kind of hits you. And so those are things that that are also a part of this experience, and it's something that I'm beginning to figure out that I got to do something about now. Fucking 8-9 years later.
Well, I mean, to its credit, the Army teaches us really well to compartmentalize. Whatever's happening to you right now, you gotta fight it out. You gotta push through it. You gotta get after it and accomplish the mission. And you gotta get to Najat. You gotta get on that striker. You gotta get back to the base. So you're not really dealing with what's happening now, or to the end of the deployment, or you got to get into flight school, or you got to do this thing. You got to get into college. You have to get your 4-year degree. Like, we compartmentalize a lot of these things because there's other things going on in our lives that take precedence. And the Army did a really good job of teaching us that as a method of mission accomplishment, getting the mission done. So it's actually a really good coping and resilience strategy on one hand, because it allows you to push past some of these things. But it's really bad for, I think, for a lot of guys' mental health to compartmentalize these things, because they can come back in a really nasty way.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a really good point, and that is, I think people sometimes wonder, well, you're successful. You're successful afterwards. You still get results. And the Army taught me how to do that. Deployment taught me how to do that. The soldiers around me taught me how to do that. My good NCOs taught me how to do that. My good leaders and the officers who led me taught me how to do that. I know how to get results. What I don't know how to do is deal with PTSD and the symptoms that are coming about me. So when I get home from work and the day all of a sudden catches up to me, and I find myself, sitting at a bird sanctuary 5 minutes from my home, and screaming at the top of my lungs, and I don't know why I'm there, and just trying to understand, why am I not fighting at Sperwangar right now? And and because 5 years later, I'm still living that life. I'm still living as if I'm there. And then fast forward to today, I've gotten some help. I It's been a long road. It's been a difficult road. My family has paid the price, and my career in the military paid the price, for me making those decisions, to finally get help. But you can you can get past these things. It never goes away. It never You're never gonna be able to stop completely the things that have happened to you in the past. You can't get rid of that trauma, but what you can do is you can learn to live with those things, and learn to live with yourself. uh, and and those are the battles that I fight today. Those are the battles that you fight today, and Luke, that you fight today. Also, it's a daily battle of uh, of weighing the difference between who you are now, and what you've experienced in the past. And it's difficult, but there's nothing uh, there's nothing more important uh, than being willing to admit that you do need that help, and going out and getting it. And there are programs. I'm not going to say that every program out there is worthwhile, and deserves to be sought after. But I had great therapists, that uh, and great doctors along the way, who assisted me in seeing the end goal, which was, I just want to be able to raise my kids, uh, and have a family, and be able to have this relationship with my wife, and have this relationship with my kids, and have this relationship with my family, and then also still embrace uh, who who I was, and the people who during that time at Sparring are important to me still. And I'm nowhere near where I need to be. I know that, uh, but um, but there is a future. There is a life that can be lived after this, and living with PTSD is actually living with it is possible.
I can't think of a better point to end on. But I'm gonna give you the opportunity, if there's anything that you wanted to say and hadn't been able to work it in just yet. This is kind of like your opportunity. The floor is yours, Matt.
I think really the only other thing that I'd like to end on is just uh, reaching out to those soldiers who I haven't personally reached out to in years, um, and just letting them know I think about you. Um, I love you. I love who you were, when we were downrange together, and I think about you every day, and I think about the things that we accomplished together, and I'm grateful to have those moments and those memories. And uh, and if for whatever reason you ever need me, you need to contact me, feel free to reach out to me, and I'm here. I'm a good listener. I can talk too, but I'm a real good listener. So uh, reach out to me, and uh, if you need to talk about anything, I'm there.
Great.
Well, Matt, thank you.
Thank you very much.
I know parts of this was really difficult for you, and we appreciate you flying up to Alaska, being willing to do this in person, being willing to be the very first guest on the Panjwai podcast. It's extremely humbling for us, so thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, this has been a really humbling experience for me. I appreciate it, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you.